The scorched horizon of Varela burned like an open wound. Charred forests smoldered beneath a purple sky, and through the smoke, the Velkar Dominion fleet drifted in silent formation. Their obsidian ships hung motionless above the planet they had just conquered, another nameless human colony reduced to ash. From a command deck of the flagship Tyrannes, Admiral Kryn observed the ruins with detached interest. His slit-pupiled eyes reflected the glow of dying cities below, and when the tactical officer announced, "All resistance neutralized," he gave only a faint nod. "They fought longer than expected," the officer added, as if the words might mean something. Kryn's mandibles twitched in amusement. "Longer," he murmured, "is still not long enough." His voice was dry, cultured, almost elegant. "Their courage is admirable. Their strategy embarrassing." The command crew laughed. A low, clicking sound filled the air, echoing across the metallic bridge. To the Velkar, war was not necessity but tradition, a test of dominance. They fought not because they needed to, but because it reminded them that they could. Below them, human survivors were herded into transports. Kryn's second-in-command, Captain Tavor, leaned toward him. "They still attempt negotiation. Their governor requests clemency." Kryn didn't look away from the holographic display. "Clemency is wasted on those who breed faster than they think." He turned sharply, his black cloak sweeping behind him. "Send the governor's message to the archives. Future cadets might find humor in it." The bridge erupted in laughter again, but it was hollow. Even the most devoted soldiers felt the monotony of conquest. Humanity was supposed to be different, dangerous perhaps, but their primitive weapons and emotional displays had proven disappointingly weak. Kryn dismissed the crew with a flick of his claw and stepped into the observation chamber. Alone, he allowed the mask of arrogance to fade, if only slightly. The galaxy had become predictable. Every species bent, begged, and broke in the same pattern. No challenge, no unpredictability, no worthy enemy. And yet there was something about these humans that unsettled him. They didn't plead as the others did. They defied even in defeat, their eyes burning with a strange defiance he couldn't name. He remembered the last broadcast from Earth before communication blackout, an old recording intercepted from a human general. The image was grainy, but the man's calm voice had lingered in Kryn's mind. "We endure, even when no one's watching." At the time, Kryn had dismissed it as poetic nonsense. Now, watching the smoldering world beneath his fleet, he felt something faintly unfamiliar, a sliver of curiosity. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral, a message from the High Council. They request confirmation of full planetary suppression." Kryn straightened. "Confirm it, and tell them the species is broken." But the word broken didn't sit comfortably on his tongue. He watched the live feed of human captives marching toward containment pods. One man, barely standing, blood streaking his face, turned and looked straight into the hovering camera drone. He didn't cry, didn't plead. He just stared and smiled. Kryn turned off the display. "Prepare the next target," he ordered quietly. The next target was Earth. The council chamber on Velkar Prime shimmered with gold and obsidian light. Towering holograms of the High Council surrounded Kryn as he delivered his report. The central figure, Chancellor Vorth, leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in irritation. "You speak of them as though they are a threat," Vorth said. "They are rodents with delusions of grandeur." Kryn's voice remained calm. "They have adapted faster than anticipated. They rebuild between strikes. Their resistance patterns suggest strategic intelligence." Vorth's laughter was sharp. "You grow sentimental in your age, Admiral. They throw rocks at plasma fire. The Dominion does not debate with stone throwers." A ripple of mockery moved through the council. Kryn didn't respond. He had learned long ago that arrogance was a kind of blindness among his people, a disease mistaken for pride. When the meeting ended, Vorth concluded with icy finality, "End this nuisance. Burn their homeworld, if you must. End the human story before it bores us further." Kryn bowed, though a part of him recoiled at the order. To the council, extermination was theater. To Kryn, it felt wasteful. He preferred control, precision, meaning. But meaning had long since left the Dominion's wars. Back aboard the Tyrannes, he stared out at the dark sea of stars. Earth shimmered faintly on the map display, a pale blue, quiet, unthreatening, small. "Prepare the fleet," he said. "We finish this." Captain Tavor grinned. "At last, the final hunt." "Yes," Kryn replied. His eyes lingered on the image of Earth. "The final hunt." On a small station hidden in the asteroid belt, Commander Elias Dre watched the same image, a pale blue dust slowly pulsing on his tactical screen. Around him, exhausted crew members moved between consoles, their faces illuminated by dim red light. Outside, the void was silent. Inside, anticipation buzzed like static. "They've entered the system," said Lieutenant Arden, voice tight. 73 ships, all Velkar heavy class. Dre didn't flinch. His expression was calm, almost serene. "Perfect," he said. "Activate the ghost grid." A hum vibrated through the station as hidden satellites around Mars came online. Invisible currents of data and decoy signals began to swirl through space, mimicking human fleet chatter and defense patterns. It was a net, a trap designed not to defeat, but to provoke. "Sir," Arden asked quietly, "what if they realize we're bait?" Dre smiled faintly. "Then we'll find out if they're capable of fear." His tone carried no bravado, only certainty. He leaned closer to the holographic display, showing the Velkar armada advancing. "They think we're broken," he said softly. "Good." The room fell silent. Dre turned toward his officers. When predators stop respecting prey, they stop surviving. As the first Velkar ship crossed Mars' orbit, Earth's defenses remained dark. Kryn's command bridge glowed with confidence. "Begin orbital bombardment," he ordered. But before the first plasma strike could reach its target, a single human transmission cut through every channel in the fleet. A voice, steady, male, unmistakably human, spoke with unnerving calm. "Unidentified vessels, you have entered restricted Earth space. Identify yourselves or be neutralized." The laughter on the Velkar bridge was immediate, thunderous. Kryn didn't laugh. Something in the voice, its composure, its lack of panic, felt wrong. "Continue the strike," he said. Then the first Velkar battleship disintegrated in a silent burst of kinetic light. The explosion rippled across the void, a blossom of precision violence. Kryn's jaw tightened. "Where did that come from?" "Unknown," Taver stammered. "The projectile came from beyond Mars, possibly automated defense railguns." "Impossible," Kryn said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked again at that blue planet, serene and small beneath his fleet. For the first time in a long while, Admiral Kryn felt something cold creep through his chest. It wasn't anger. It was the quiet realization that the game might have just changed. The silence that followed the explosion was deafening. Debris from the destroyed Velkar warship drifted through space, illuminated by the faint glow of distant starlight. Admiral Kryn stood motionless at the command dais, his mandibles clenched tight. The crew around him scrambled to recalibrate sensors, shouting over one another, voices tinged with disbelief. It had been centuries since a Dominion vessel, one of their heavy-class dreadnoughts, had fallen so easily. And to humans of all things? Impossible. "Report," Kryn said finally, his tone low and sharp as a blade. "Source of the strike, unknown," replied Taver, eyes flicking across the displays. "It came from the outer ring of Mars. But there's nothing there, no bases, no satellites, not even civilian debris." Kryn moved closer to the screen, narrowing his gaze at the tactical feed. "Then something is there," he said softly, "and it doesn't want to be found." The bridge trembled as another explosion flared in the distance. This time, two smaller ships vanished from a grid, no warning, no trace of projectiles. Just destruction. The Velkar fleet began to reposition, panic edging into once arrogant voices. Kryn's claws tapped the command console in measured rhythm. "Cease fire. Pull the fleet to minimum engagement distance." Taver looked up sharply. "Admiral, retreat?" "Against." "Not retreat. Observation." Kryn's eyes glowed with something between suspicion and awe. "They're not fighting for survival. They're studying us." The words struck the bridge like a chill wind. No one dared to argue. On Earth, deep beneath the Antarctic ice, Commander Elias Dre watched the same events unfold through the holographic feed projected above his command table. The Velkar fleet was flailing, their disciplined formation breaking apart like frightened fish. Dre's expression remained calm, though fatigue shadowed his face. "They took the bait," said Lieutenant Arden, stepping closer. "Our frequency mimics are working. They still think the main defense is near Mars." Dre nodded. "Good. Let them see what they expect to see." A murmur passed through the operations chamber as human technicians monitored thousands of signals, phantom ships, fake distress calls, and fabricated energy readings. Project Prometheus had been activated in full. Dre's fingers traced a faint scar along his jaw, an old reminder from the first years of the war. "They spent decades mocking us," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "We learned every insult, every tactic. We let them believe they'd broken us." Arden hesitated. "Sir, they destroyed half our colonies." "I know," Dre replied quietly. "That's why they never saw the pattern. We gave them pain, and they mistook it for defeat." He turned toward the viewing screen, eyes cold. "Send word to Lunar Command. Stage 2 authorization." A chorus of confirmations followed. Across the solar system, hidden human fleets stirred from the shadows, automated carriers, stealth drones, long-range kinetic platforms. They had been built in silence, financed by a desperate alliance of survivors. Every weapon was born from necessity, every line of code written with vengeance and restraint intertwined. Dre exhaled. "Let's see if the predators can still laugh." Back aboard the Tyrannies, Kryn stared at the wreckage of his fleet. He had ordered no counterattack, choosing instead to analyze the pattern of human strikes. But there was no pattern. Each hit was too precise, too adaptive. It was as if the enemy already knew his next move. "Admiral," Taver whispered, "our comms are being jammed. The encryption layers, they're shifting with our own frequencies." "There," he hesitated, disbelief evident. "They're copying us in real time." Kryn's gaze flickered with realization. "Not copying," he said. "Learning." He ordered the tactical feed to isolate communication data, stripping away visual interference. The raw streams of information glowed before him, Velkar signals twisting, merging with alien code structures. Human code. It was fluid, almost organic, constantly adapting. Kryn could almost feel the intelligence behind it. He spoke quietly, not to anyone in particular. "They're speaking our language now." A long pause followed before Taver whispered, "What do we do, Admiral?" Kryn's voice dropped to a low growl. "We watch. We learn faster." He stepped back, studying the darkness beyond the viewport. The stars shimmered faintly, reflecting off the hulls of retreating ships. His pride wanted to lash out, to remind the galaxy who ruled the void. But instinct, older and sharper, urged restraint. Something about this new enemy felt different. Humanity was not reacting like prey. Hours later, in the privacy of his quarters, Kryn replayed a captured transmission intercepted from human networks. It was a fragment of old footage, grainy, unenhanced. Soldiers in muddy trenches screamed as artillery shells fell around them. A human officer, blood streaking his helmet, barked orders over the chaos. There was no advanced technology, no precision, just willpower. Primitive, relentless, unstoppable. Kryn couldn't look away. The footage changed again. Tanks rolling through ruined cities, nuclear fire swallowing horizons, smoke rising over shattered continents. The cycle repeated, war after war, generation after generation. Each conflict worse than the last, yet each ending with humanity still alive. He felt something unexpected stir in his chest. Not admiration, not pity, fear. These creatures didn't merely survive war. They evolved through it. He turned off the recording, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. "We thought they were fragile," he murmured, "but they're forged in their own destruction." When the door hissed open behind him, Taver stepped inside. "The Council demands an update. Shall I tell them we're preparing the final strike?" Kryn didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out and tapped the star map, zooming in on Earth. "No," he said softly. "Tell them we're observing." Taver blinked, uncertain if he'd heard correctly. "Observing?" Kryn nodded. Every empire that believed itself eternal fell the moment it underestimated what crawled beneath it. "Let's make sure we're not next." Back on Earth, Dre stood before a panoramic viewport, watching the faint light of the Velkar retreat. "They'll regroup," Arden said beside him. "Of course," Dre replied. "And when they do, they'll be careful." He smiled faintly, eyes reflecting the distant glow of their enemy. "That's when they'll start to fear us." "Fear us, sir?" Arden asked. Dre nodded slowly. "Yes. Because once a predator hesitates, it's already lost the hunt." He turned from a window and walked back toward the operations table, the hum of the control room surrounding him like a heartbeat. Above them, unseen by human eyes, the Velkar fleet drifted in fractured silence, still powerful, still vast, but no longer certain. And somewhere in that uncertainty, the balance of the galaxy began to shift. The council chamber on Velkar Prime shimmered with pale gold light, but beneath its beauty lay unease. The air pulsed with low-frequency murmurs from dozens of holographic delegates, each projecting from distant star systems. Admiral Kryn stood in the center of the room, surrounded by power, yet entirely alone. The High Chancellor's voice, smooth and venomous, cut through the static. "You claim the humans possess strategic intelligence comparable to ours," he said. "Do you also claim they have the power to threaten the Dominion?" Kryn met the Chancellor's gaze, his tone steady but firm. "Not comparable," he said. "Different. They think in ways we do not, ways we cannot predict. Their wars are not about victory. They're about survival, and they have mastered it." Laughter rippled through the council, hollow and arrogant. "A dying species fighting to live is not a strategist, Admiral," another voice said. "It's a cornered animal." Kryn's mandibles tightened. "And yet," he replied quietly, "it's always the cornered animal that bites hardest." The counselors exchanged glances, amusement fading into discomfort. But Chancellor Vortha's expression remained coldly confident. "Your caution borders on cowardice. Humanity is fractured, technologically primitive. Our fleets will erase them within the rotation. Prepare your report and execute the order." Kryn inclined his head, though he did not bow. "As you command." When the meeting dissolved into static light, he stood for a moment in the echoing silence, feeling the familiar weight of inevitability press against his chest. The Dominion had forgotten fear. They had forgotten what it meant to bleed. And Kryn feared that when they remembered, it would be too late. The Tyrannies cut through hyperspace toward the front lines, its engines humming like distant thunder. Kryn stood at the viewport, watching the stars stretch into ribbons of light. Tavor approached cautiously. "The Council approved the invasion," he said. "They expect Earth to fall within the day." Kryn didn't turn. "Expectations are the luxuries of the untested." "You doubt the outcome." "I doubt certainty," Kryn said. His gaze hardened. "And I despise arrogance more than defeat." The younger officer shifted uneasily. "Admiral, if you fear them, why not strike now before they grow stronger?" Kryn turned, eyes gleaming. "Because fear is not the same as respect. I intend to understand them before I destroy them." On Earth, Commander Dre stood beneath the fractured glow of the command center. The war map stretched before him like a living organism, red zones shifting, adapting, pulsing. The Velkar fleet had re-entered the system, larger than before, their numbers swelling like a dark tide. Humanity's defenses were ready, but Dre felt the weight of the coming storm pressing against his ribs. "Status of the Phantom Array?" he asked. "Fully operational," Arden replied. "They'll think we have double the ships we do." "Good. Deception buys us time. Precision wins the war." He leaned over the console, fingers tracing the path of the enemy fleet. His eyes were steady, his tone almost detached, but the men around him could sense it, the calm before something immense. "They'll come with everything they have," Dre said, "and we'll make them believe that's still not enough." Arden hesitated. "Sir, what if they don't stop?" Dre looked up, his expression unreadable. "Then we remind them what happens when humans stop holding back." When the Velkar fleet arrived, the void itself seemed to tremble. The Dominion armada darkened the edge of Earth's orbit, vast and gleaming, a mechanical swarm blotting out the stars. Kryn watched from the bridge, the rhythm of his heart's accelerating. He had expected fear from the humans, panic, desperation, but what came instead unsettled him deeply. A single human transmission cut through every channel, clear and calm. "Attention, Dominion fleet. You have entered human space without authorization. This is your final warning." Tavor laughed under his breath. "They repeat the same threat as before. Predictable." Kryn didn't laugh. He studied the data scrolling across his console. The message hadn't come from Earth. It had come from multiple points across the system, each one mimicking the same voice with perfect synchronization. Then came the light. Hundreds of wormholes opened behind the Velkar fleet, silent and exact. From them emerged human ships, not vast but coordinated, moving like parts of a single mind. Their hulls shimmered with adaptive cloaks, their movements impossibly precise. The Dominion's formation collapsed in moments. "Impossible," Tavor whispered. "They can't generate that many gates." "They're not gates," Kryn said softly, eyes wide. "They're reflections. They're mirroring our own systems." The first strike came not from weapons, but from silence. Communication channels died, guidance systems froze, and for the first time in generations, the Velkar fleet fought blind. Kryn's voice thundered through the chaos. disengage and regroup. They're inside our network. But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. Every command he issued, every maneuver, was anticipated. It was as though humanity had already fought this battle, again and again, until perfection was achieved. He turned toward the viewport, watching human ships move with surgical grace, disabling targets rather than destroying them. There was no cruelty in their tactics, only precision. It wasn't conquest, it was control. Tavor's voice trembled. They're sparing us. Kryn's gaze darkened. No, they're sending a message. Hours later, as the battlefield fell silent, the Dominion fleet drifted in fragments across the void. Thousands of ships had been neutralized, their systems hacked, their weapons disabled. Yet the humans didn't pursue. They simply withdrew, leaving wreckage and silence in their wake. On the Tyrannies, Kryn stood amid the aftermath, the command deck dim and battered. His crew avoided his eyes. The High Council would demand an explanation. But what explanation could there be for arrogance undone by patience? Tavor spoke softly, almost pleadingly. We can still recover. Request reinforcements. No, Kryn's voice was calm, heavy with understanding. The war is over. They've already won. Tavor blinked. But Admiral, we still hold. Kryn cut him off with a raised hand. Do you not feel it? He asked. His eyes drifted toward the dark expanse of space. That quiet weight pressing against the air? That's what defeat sounds like before you accept it. He stood in silence for a long time. Then, almost to himself, he said, They warned us once. We thought it was defiance. It was mercy. Outside the viewport, Earth rotated slowly, blue and brilliant, no longer prey, no longer small. The sight filled Kryn with something he could not name, a mixture of dread and reverence. For the first time in his life, the great admiral of the Dominion realized he had never understood the meaning of fear until now. The stars burned cold over a broken empire. The once mighty Velkar Dominion drifted in silence, its fleets fractured and scattered across the void. The galaxy that had trembled beneath their shadow now watched in disbelief as the predators of 1,000 worlds bowed their heads to the species they once called weak. In the heart of that silence, aboard a human vessel gliding through the remnants of the last battle, Commander Elias Dre stared out at the wreckage. His reflection merged with the stars, sharp and weary. The war was over. The silence that followed was heavier than any weapon. Transmission from Velkar Prime, said Arden, his voice hushed. They've surrendered, sir. All fleets. All colonies. Dre didn't react. He just nodded slowly. Accept it, he said. When the transmission faded, he remained still, his hands resting against the glass. The universe had turned upside down, but there was no triumph in his eyes, only an understanding that victory came with a cost that no number could measure. The war had revealed what humanity was capable of, and that revelation could not be undone. A soft chime broke the stillness. Incoming delegation, Arden said, glancing at the display. Velkar flagship unarmed. Their admiral requests parley. Dre's mouth tightened into something between a sigh and a smile. Let him dock. Minutes later, the docking bay filled with the echo of magnetic clamps and mechanical hisses. When the ramp descended, Admiral Kryn stepped through the mist, unarmed, unguarded. His armor was battered, the sigils of his empire scorched and dull. His eyes, however, still carried the same piercing intensity, though now it was tempered by something new, humility. Dre met him halfway across the deck. No guards flanked the human commander. None were needed. The silence between them was almost reverent. You came, Dre said simply. Kryn's voice was rough. I had to see the man who ended the Dominion. Dre shook his head. No one ended it. It ended itself. We just stopped running. The aliens studied him for a long moment, the faint hum of the ship filling the space between their words. Your tactics, they were not vengeance, not conquest. You dismantled us piece by piece, and then you stopped. His mandibles clicked softly. Why? Dre turned his gaze toward the viewport. Beyond it, fragments of shattered warships glimmered like distant tombstones. Because extinction is easy, he said. Restraint is what separates us from what you thought we were. Kryn lowered his head slightly, his expression unreadable. You could rule the galaxy now. Dre gave a faint, almost sorrowful smile. Rule it? No. That's what you did. We'll rebuild it. For the first time, Kryn looked uncertain. Rebuild it into what? Something better, Dre replied. Something that remembers what fear taught us. They stood there for a long moment, two soldiers from opposite ends of evolution, predator and prey, hunter and survivor, now bound by the same exhaustion. When they spoke again, it was softer. "I once called your kind fragile," Kryn said. "Now I see that you were never fragile, only patient." Dre turned his eyes back to the alien, calm and unwavering. "You mistook mercy for weakness. That's why you lost." Kryn's throat vibrated with a low, bitter sound, half laugh, half sigh. "And yet you offer me life." Dre nodded. "Because someone has to remember how it ended." A brief silence passed before Kryn spoke again, his tone quieter than before. "The council is gone. The worlds are leaderless. My people will turn on each other." "Then you'll stop them," Dre said simply. "You'll govern them under our guidance." Kryn's eyes widened. "You would trust me with that?" "I would trust what you've learned," Dre replied. "You saw what they didn't. You warned them, and they mocked you for it. That makes you more dangerous than any of them, but also more useful." There was no arrogance in the words, only truth. Kryn lowered his head. "And if I refuse?" Dre's gaze hardened, though his voice remained calm. "Then I'll find someone who doesn't." For a heartbeat, Kryn considered defiance. But then he saw something in Dre's expression, not threat, but the quiet certainty of someone who had seen too much death to glorify it. He realized then that humanity had moved beyond the old cycles of domination. They were not conquerors. They were custodians of a future born in fire. Kryn knelt. "Then I will serve." Dre nodded once. "Rise then, not as a servant, as a witness." When Kryn stood again, his gaze drifted once more toward the window. The wreckage of his empire floated like a graveyard, but somewhere in that silence, he felt something strange, relief. "We mocked you," he said softly. "All of us. We thought your kind was destined to be prey." Dre's reply was quiet, but it carried the weight of history. "And you were right," he said. "We were prey, until something older than fear woke up inside us." "What was it?" Kryn asked. Dre looked at him, eyes steady as stone. "Understanding." Outside, the stars pulsed faintly as the human fleet began to withdraw, their silhouettes gliding past the ruins of war. They weren't scavengers claiming spoils, they were caretakers tending to what remained. Humanity had no anthem for victory, no celebration. Only the knowledge that survival, once earned, came with responsibility. Kryn broke the silence once more. "What happens now?" Dre turned toward him. "Now," he said, "we begin something that doesn't end in ashes." As they left the docking bay, the corridor lights dimmed to simulate dusk. The war was over, but the universe felt newly awake, tense with possibility. Soldiers on both sides watched the pair pass, some with confusion, others with awe. It was the image of a new order, the conqueror walking beside the conquered, neither bowed, neither triumphant. Later, in the observation chamber, Kryn stood beside Dre as Earth came into view, a fragile blue sphere wrapped in white. The sight of it filled the alien with a feeling he could not name. He had seen countless worlds, but none had ever looked alive the way this one did. "You could have destroyed us," Kryn said quietly. Dre's voice was calm, almost tired. "We almost did. But every empire that dies teaches the next one how to live. We're just hoping we learn faster than you did." Kryn watched the Earth turn slowly below them, his reflection merging with Dre's in the glass. "We mocked the small human," he said, almost in wonder. Dre's gaze didn't move from the stars, and found the predator that calls him brother. Neither spoke after that. The hum of the ship faded into the quiet rhythm of deep space, and for the first time since the war began, there was no sound of engines, no screams of dying worlds, only the soft pulse of two civilizations standing on the edge of something new. The stars beyond seemed endless, patient, waiting for what humanity would do next. And though no one said it aloud, both men felt the same unspoken truth rise within them. This was not the end of war. It was the beginning of evolution.